the Committee of the Whole of the City of Bloomington to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Mathey.
Here.
Councilmember Bolin.
Here.
Councilmember Montney.
Here.
Councilmember Emig.
Here.
Councilmember Becker.
Here.
Councilmember Carrillo.
Here.
Councilmember Ward. Councilmember Cray. Oh, Councilmember Ward. I see you there. Councilmember Crable.
Here.
Councilmember Crumpler.
Here.
Okay, next item on our agenda is our COVID-19 update by City Manager Gleason.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Real quick, I think Alderwoman Ward is asking if she's still muted, even though it's showing that you're not. We still cannot hear you. No.
Councilmember Ward, I was going to say we can have IT contact you.
On the COVID update, actually, there's been a fair amount that has occurred. I know at the council meeting last Monday, we reported information for the community entering in the bridge phase. That came at state level from Governor Pritzker. And then also the CDC announced this past week the elimination of wearing masks for those that are vaccinated in public and social settings. And that's one where it's actually turned into quite the discussion internally for the organization. Maybe not so much for the community, but it's something that we need to figure out. How does that impact city services, city facilities? And it might seem that it's just quite simply an easy answer. We just follow the state guidelines and the CDC guidelines. But we know that based on the reporting that we are not necessarily satisfied with the level of vaccinations, but yet we are going to eliminate wearing the masks and not going to have any idea who's been vaccinated or not vaccinated. So inside city facilities, what does that mean for city employees? What does that mean for trying to protect the city services that we provide the community? It's one that we're working through, I guess, is my answer to the elected body and to the community tonight. The one thing to share is city facilities are open. The hub opened today. I'll have additional comments about that, the grand opening later in the meeting. But as far as city services, city facilities, we are open to the public, but there is definitely more to come. One more item, Mayor and Council, want to remind the community, and we said this last week as well. The Illinois Housing Development Authority has a grant program up to $25,000 for tenants and for landlords for reimbursement up to 12 months, and then also 3 additional or future months. The potential is 15 months total. That's something that we have heard. You know, we heard public comment. I know the elected officials have heard concerns from some of the tenants, the residents that were having challenges making rent and trying very hard to make rent. You know, not those that were problems pre-COVID and continued to be problems during COVID. We also heard from the landlords and through the course of the pandemic. This is something that we've shared with our state representatives. This is something that we've shared with our lobbyist, Julie Curry. And I know that us, like many communities, the administration heard and acted on some of those very real concerns for tenants and for property owners, that landlords. Could go on a little bit longer, Mayor, but I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, City Manager Gleason. Next, we're going to move on to our consent agenda with only one item, consideration and action to approve the minutes of March 15, 2021, as requested by the City Clerk's Department.
Mayor, excuse me. Sorry, we have public comment.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry. I missed that. It was my first snafu here. Okay, all right. So next on the agenda is public comment. Um, Public comment is an opportunity for speakers to provide their views and feedback to the city council. It is also an opportunity for the city council to listen and hear diverse points of view. To maximize the impact of public comment and show respect for the expression of all views, speakers should maintain civility and focus on city issues. Speakers must identify themselves for the record, but are not required to give their address. Each speaker is given the floor for 3 minutes, and the city council does not respond or engage in debate. Any speaker that engages in threatening or disorderly behavior will be deemed out of order and their time ceased. Madam Clerk, do we have live public comment?
We do. We have Alan Axelrod on the line.
Okay.
Alan, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
You can.
Yes. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you. So my name is Alan Max Axelrod. I'm the campaign lead of No Ameren Shutoffs, a $0 all-volunteer group of 48 organizations and counting, spanning the state of Illinois, north and south, east and west. If you can still hear me, I'm updating you about the governor's press release, which I believe was touched on a little bit today, where $1.5 billion in rent assistance was made available for using federal dollars for landlords, property managers, or the tenants. Either can apply for it. And the press release from the governor's office includes that information on how to apply. I would highly recommend that be taken advantage of, because you only have until June 7th to apply for that money. The second thing is the Utility Disconnection Avoidance Program, which was in part created in response to this body's initiative and subsequent resolution, went over budget already. They had allocated $80 million, and that was supposed to help 80,000 households. It is now spent already $115 million for 115,000 households. These are households that would have been disconnected, that have received utility subsidies in the last 3 years, which isn't everybody, because despite the fact that 115,000 households received interventionary assistance that would have otherwise resulted in them getting a shutoff had they not received that money, over 16,000 households were disconnected in April. This is half the rate at which disconnections occurred last fall, which is overall good news. The question remains, what will happen with those disconnections as it relates to public health? That remains to be seen, because the deferred payment agreements that people have entered into have their first payments due, after the down payment, of course, this coming few weeks. So we don't know what's going to happen, but right now we're very encouraged by what we're seeing. Maybe what was done is enough, but it wouldn't have happened without the advocacy of this body. I apologize if I went over time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Axelrod. Do we have anybody else, Madam Clerk?
We do not have anyone else on the line. I did want to report that we received one emailed public comment, and that was from David Eisner.
Okay. Thank you very much. And now, drum roll, on to the consent agenda.
I will make the motion to approve as presented.
Thank you. Motion by Councilmember Boland. Is there a second?
I'll second, if you can hear me.
Yes, I could hear, but who was that?
It was Molly Ward.
Oh, okay, Councilmember Ward. Thank you. Thank you so much. So second by Councilmember Ward. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Mathey,
Yes.
Councilmember Boland,
Yes.
Councilmember Montney,
Yes.
Councilmember Emig,
Yes.
Councilmember Becker,
Yes.
Councilmember Carrillo,
Yes.
Councilmember Ward,
Aye.
Councilmember Crable,
Yes.
Councilmember Crumpler.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. The item passes and there are no nays to announce. Next item on the agenda is item 6A, presentation by the Bloomington Police Department's 2020 annual report as requested by the police department. I'm gonna turn it over to City Manager Gleason for some introductory comments if she has any.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Very much look forward to both public safety presentations tonight. These were first going to be presented at the Committee of the Whole in March, but we had a full agenda then, and then I held it purposely in April, Committee of the Whole, waiting for this new body of elected officials to be seated. So we're going to hear them tonight at the May Committee of the Whole. Very proud of the police department. We just did finish up Law Enforcement Appreciation Week. Very much appreciate what the Bloomington Police Department does for us. Very standard presentation. I think there's a number of items that the community can be extremely proud of, and look forward to more in the upcoming year, 2021. Chief Scott, it's all yours.
Mayor and Council, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to share the Police Department's 2020 year-end police report with you. Do we have the slideshow? Oh, there it goes. If you could go ahead and move to the next slide. And one more time. You'll notice that the total Part 1 crime is lower by 14.1%. This has been a continuing trend, a slight downward trend for the past several years in these Part 1 crimes. In the following slides, I'll present more specific information analysis on selected crime types and touch briefly on some COVID impacts on these, or at least what we believe may be COVID impacts. Next slide, please. So on this slide just basically presents to you each one of the Part 1 crime codes that we track for 2020. Now in 2021, these are going to be different because of course we are mandated to switch to the National Incident-Based Reporting System, or NIBRS. So we're in the process of doing that now. Particular to note on this page is you'll see criminal sexual assault was 49 in 2019 and in 2020 was up to 64. This is a statistic for some reason that pretty widely varies year over year. We haven't been able to necessarily figure out why that is. We think maybe it's a difference in focus. Maybe if there's a new reporting push that would come from the community, maybe we get a few more reports that way. It can also be a reflection in the change of laws. You'll remember a year or two ago when we started taking anonymous, not really anonymous, reports without, if the victim didn't want to pursue anything, we still took the report so that in the event they changed their mind later, we could go ahead and move forward with testing and investigation if possible. So I just wanted to point that one particular number out to you there. It kind of stood out to me when I first reviewed these numbers as well. Can we move to the next slide? So again, we're going to take a look at a few of the specific crimes. Go ahead and hit the next. Yeah, there you go. So in 2020, we did record the one homicide, and 2 arrests have been made, and a 3rd suspect is currently wanted. If you would move to the next one. The single homicide that we had in 2019, which was over on Orchard Road, is closed with 3 arrests. We have 2 convictions so far. And then the next bullet point. So all of our 2018 homicides, if you'll remember, that was an anomaly year for us. We had 9 homicides in that year. They all have been closed by arrest. We have 1 remaining yet in this year for trial, and that's the Oak Street homicide. So the men and women of CID, Criminal Investigation Division, the police department have done a great job in doing these investigations. And it's important to note that We don't do these all by ourselves. These are a significant cooperation from the community and our citizens, as well as a testament to the effectiveness of the camera systems, both public and private, that we have out there. So these are great numbers. I mean, great numbers that we've solved them. The optimum, the number we want to have is 0, so we don't have to do the investigations. Next slide, please. So in 2020, we recorded those 27 shootings, which is down from 33 in 2019. The thing to think here, to pay attention to, is this is really not gang related. We've had a reduction in gang related violence over the past year or two. So what we're seeing here is mostly from about 2019 on, 2018 on. These are mostly folks who are having a personal conflict, and then rather than talk it out or, you know, old schoolyard stuff, they decide to settle it with a firearm. And then, you know, it's romanticized a lot in the youth culture. So these are really not gang related. They're not really related. If you look back at the homicides on the previous page, those aren't like we had years ago, where one gang would shoot on one side of town and then on the other side of town you'd have a retaliatory shooting. These are all individual personal conflict issues that were unfortunately attempted to be settled with a firearm. So next slide, please. Robberies, we dropped from 57 to 23. Much of last year's increase is due to social media marketplace sale robberies. So that's where people put something for sale on Facebook Marketplace, and then they choose to meet up someplace to do the exchange. And then they're either robbed of their item that they were trying to sell, or what they were trying to sell, and their money. So the police department, to try to assist in this, has offered up the front parking lot of the police department for community members to come in and make those exchanges there. It's not that we stand out there and watch or observe or anything, but you know, the parking lot is recorded. And if someone has ill intent towards another citizen, they might think twice about it while they're in the parking lot of the police department. So we have done that to try to assist in that. We do also believe that some of this has gone down due to COVID, you know, with everybody quarantining at home and not really being out in public and making those personal connections. That probably had a hand in reducing this particular statistic. Next slide, please. DUI arrests. We believe this is another category where we've seen a COVID impact. Would love to tell you that it's the years of good enforcement by the men and women of the Bloomington Police Department, people deciding not to drink and drive, but we really believe this is probably COVID related. With bars being closed and fewer social gatherings, we believe there was fewer opportunities for people to drink and drive. Rest assured that DUI enforcement remains a priority for the Bloomington Police Department. As COVID restrictions ease up and we have the ability to engage again in Illinois Department of Transportation grants, we will return to DUI enforcement, seatbelt enforcement, and distracted driving enforcement. All of that was put on pause last year with COVID for the safety of our citizens as well as the officers. Next slide, please. Domestic violence, in my experience, in the past almost 25 years as a police officer, whenever we had a heavy snowfall, I pretty much counted that domestic violence would go up. Anytime you get people in an enclosed space for a prolonged period of time, it seems like domestic violence goes up. We expected to see a little bit of a spike due to COVID, and we did. It was up about 9.6%, which is just a touch above the national average, but you know, it's just one of those things. You you get people in an enclosed space for, you know, a long time, and they start arguing and carry on and those sorts of things. So yeah, it was an increase, but it wasn't an unexpected increase. Next page, please. So youth crime efforts. In 2019, we launched a partnership with City Life and Andrew Held. This program really sought to bridge a piece of the puzzle that we didn't have an influence in, and that being conflict resolution. Andrew Held did a really good job for us in some of the 2018 homicides. He was one of the first people there, and he was in the crowds talking with a lot of the people, a lot of the young men and women that were distraught over the homicides. He did a really nice job in mitigating some of that. Unfortunately, City Life is no longer is functioning in Bloomington Normal, and Andrew Held's no longer there. So this is really a piece that we are going to be investigating going forward to see if we can find another person or program that we can fit into this place. We believe this is vital in the community for our young people to learn conflict resolution outside of firearms or violence in general. This is a vital piece that we will be researching closely to try to fill in. Next slide, please. Some of our goals going forward. We've really missed out on the opportunity in 2019 to engage with the public in a face-to-face, one-on-one venue. Things like Project with a Cop, Ice Cream with a Cop, Coffee with a Cop, all those things went on hold, and we really missed those opportunities to engage directly. We were able to accomplish the Shop with a Cop. It was really a different event. The kids came out and they went out and shopped, and then myself and the two other assistant chiefs were able to greet the youngsters as they come through with their parents. It was a fun time. It was a good time to make good community contact, but it just wasn't the same as the traditional Shop with a Cop. So we really are looking forward to doing that. We will continue to expand our transparency portal. So you'll see the website there. I'm not going to try to read all that for you, but if you go to that website and you see the transparency tab, we are building out a lot of use of force data and a lot of that other data that is typically something that the community is interested in and that they have a right to see. And we want to make it as easy as possible for that to be found. So all of that data is there, as well as our SOPs. Most all of our SOPs are there using a system that once we update it in the police department and publish it, it's automatically updated on that website. So it's a great step forward in our transparency effort to make as much information available as quickly as possible. We are going to continue to expand our efforts with the McLean County Triage Program to assist people who are in mental health crisis, to, rather than getting them involved with the criminal justice system, if we can divert them there to receive treatment or counseling or just an opportunity someplace to cool down and relax, that's exactly what the Triage Center is for. So we are enjoying that partnership, and we plan to continue to use that. Next slide, please. We're going to continue to develop some of the mobile access that we've given to officers as well as to the community. One of the COVID opportunities that we took was we developed an online reporting system for select report types. Essentially, those are reports where there's no evidence to collect and there's no suspect on scene. Those can be filed online. So we'd like to continue to do that, make it as easy as possible for our citizens and community to take care of the things that they need to take care of. But of course, if the community prefer to have an officer come out and talk to them, we will absolutely do that. This isn't an all or nothing kind of a maneuver. This is just so that we can keep everybody safe. And sometimes just for convenience sake, it's easier to do it online. One of the big issues facing the department, among others, but this is a big one, is the McLean County for a long time has been on the e-justice system. It started 2 years after I got hired. And it's really a fantastic system. All law enforcement, all justice systems, excuse me, are able to access this system. So our police reports, normal police reports, McLean County, it's just a really great system. The problem is it's been around for 20 years, and it's old technology. And with the transition to the NIBRS reporting system, Aegis was not written with that system in mind. So the county put together a patch so that we can continue to use this system. However, that patch requires some extra work. And it's really not as seamless as we'd like it to be. So we need to begin researching a new record management system. Pardon me. We'll continue our system-wide approach to illegal weapons. That's everything from patrol, criminal investigations, and the McLean County State's Attorney. And then we're looking forward to continue our diversity recruitment with the help of the city's diversity and, sorry, I have a tickle in my throat. The city's chief diversity and inclusion officer, Michael Hurt, as well as the Public Safety Citizen Review Board and the NAACP. We're really working hard to continue to recruit a diverse workforce that better represents our city. And I believe with that, City Manager and Mayor, Council, if there's any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer.
Thank you very much, Interim Chief Scott. I guess at this point, we're going to go ahead and ask council members if there are any questions. What I would also ask you, because some of you I cannot see on my screen, so if you wave, although it's very friendly and nice, I might not see you. So I would ask that you try to raise your hand through the electronic system. It's a lot easier for me to manage that way. Or unless you want to be patient until I can recognize you. So at this point, we do have Councilmember Craybill.
Thank you, Chief Scott. And if you're not able to answer these questions because of the tickle in your throat, just let us know. But yeah, really, we can really be proud of the job that you've all done, especially during the pandemic. And I've also been on your site and seen the transparency link. And yes, there's a lot of data there, as well as the SOP, standard operating procedures. So that's awesome. Just a few questions. So the data that you gave tonight, those are basically crimes that are reported, not necessarily arrests or convictions, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And is that kept track of in any way?
Yeah, the arrests compared to the crimes reported?
Right.
It is tracked, but the difficulty would come in that sometimes, you may report a particular crime, and then as we get in and investigate it, it may branch into other crimes. So it's not
Right.
It's a little more difficult to say we had X offense and B arrest was directly related to that offense, other than say like the homicides. Those are tracked in whole.
Right.
So
right.
the data would be available. It would just be more difficult to give it in such a succinct manner.
Right. Right. Thank you. So I tried to word this question. So I'm not sure it's understandable, but I'm going to try. So like during the pandemic, I believe, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, that where there was an arrest and it was discretionary as to whether to take the person to jail or leave them, in essence, to appear later on, that there was more discretion used to not take them to jail due to the pandemic. And was that the case, I guess? And is that going to continue to happen?
You worded that very well, sir. Actually, yeah, we did. They were called notice to appears. The state's attorney gave us clear direction on how and when we should be using those and what efforts we could use those towards. And as far as I know, that's going to continue for some time. I don't, the state's attorney hasn't communicated to us any end to that program. So it is in fact still going on.
And one more question I'll ask about overtime. And I know that I was just looking at the numbers, and it was about 1.2 million 2019, and that's an increase from past years, and then it stayed about the same with the amount of money for overtime. Is there any thought of we need to reduce that, and how we do that?
I could tell you the easiest way to reduce it would probably to come up to full strength, which is our authorized strength of 128, would help immensely to reduce that. The other big piece of that is the downtown hire back. We do spend, I want to say it's in the neighborhood of 40,000 a year. That's purely a guess, so don't hold me to that number as a solid number. I can get it for you if you like. That would be the easiest way, is for us to get back up to full strength, because we are hiring back for all shifts almost every day, just due to the lack of manpower staffing at this point.
What are your numbers right now with regard to patrol officers?
Yeah, on paper, patrol. Well, I don't have the hard patrol numbers right now, but our total staff authorized strength is 128. I believe we're at 126, but I have 4 people, at least 4, maybe 6 that are out on job injury. And then I have 3 that are currently at the academy. So if you subtract all of them out, I'm probably down to 112, 115, somewhere in there. And then I have about 60 officers that are on patrol.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you, Chief. That's all I have.
Glad to.
Real quick, Alderman Crable, I guess additionally to the staffing challenges that the police department's facing, we actually have a practice. We get a list, candidate pool. We will go ahead and do the background check so that we can fast track those individuals into the academies when there's vacancies. We've even at times overhired just to try to stay in front of some of the very real staffing challenges that PD has.
Great, thanks, Tim.
Sorry, I was muted. Councilmember Ward.
Thank you. And thank you, Chief Scott, for this report and for what you're doing. I just have a couple of questions specifically about weapons violence. In particular, I wonder, would you be able to offer any statistics, and feel free to direct me to the website. But I'm wondering, you mentioned of the 27 shootings, were those including weapons discharges without injury, or were they, what portion of those were with injuries?
No, those would be verified shootings where we either had, say, an eyewitness that said they saw it, or we actually located evidence that there was a weapon fired, whether that would be a shell casing or maybe a bullet impact someplace.
Okay, but it would also include injuries.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, okay. And then you mentioned also the youth culture as being, one of the aspects of recent shootings. And I'm wondering, do you have any averages on ages of shooters and targets, or is that something that?
I don't have that information available, but I can get it to you.
Great, that would be really helpful. And then the last question I had to do is, could you expand a little bit? You talked about a system-wide approach to illegal weapons and gun violence, and and gang-related activity. Can you talk specific, or just kind of flesh that out? What's the system-wide approach about?
Sure. Well, that is our total system at the police department. So from patrol to our street crimes unit to criminal investigations, they all take those offenses seriously and we investigate them. We have some unique investigative tools that we've used recently to take some weapons off of the street, even before they had the opportunity to get shot. And I really don't want to go into detail on what those investigative techniques are. And then the state's attorney has done a really nice job in picking up those cases and charging them as appropriate. Rather than, in the past, there's been a much more soft response to weapons offenses for certain persons, and that's kind of turned the corner. Of course, they are still restricted by law to do the things that they can do. So system-wide is essentially all of that, as well as, our school resource officers are doing conflict resolution through restorative practices. They are intervening wherever they can, helping students get through all those issues as they can. And then we do partner with, like Boys and Girls Club and other agencies. We have also partnered with Moms Demand Action. We system-wide for me is everyone from the patrol officer to the criminal investigations division to everyone in the McLean County State's Attorney's Office, as well as all of the social agencies that we have in the community that we can partner with to get the message out that violence is not the answer to an argument or to being disrespected. Does that answer your question?
It does. And the one follow-up question I have is, do you feel like you have the resources for specifically those kinds of programs, or do you feel like there's room to have more resources for that?
I think there's always room for more resources. And, like city manager would probably be unhappy with me if I said I had everything I needed. But I truly believe that the more resources that we had, especially within the community that we can partner with, it would just probably impact the problem exponentially as we move forward, because there's people that have a specialty with grade school kids. There's people out there that really enjoy junior high students. There's people that really enjoy high school students, and just on up the chain. So I think the community that can get behind any one of those particular aspects of the youth and reach into them and help them learn how to solve their differences peacefully and through discourse, that would just be fantastic. And we would love to come alongside and help in any way that we can.
And I'm guessing you could probably come up with a list of specifics without too much trouble.
Given a little bit of time, I could probably give you some specific answers.
Great.
I'll make a note of it.
Thank you.
You bet.
Okay. Thank you so much. Councilmember Heemink.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for your presentation, Chief Scott. So first, I just want to make a comment, and I've been thinking about what you said of the youth culture and violence, and it seems that there's also a culture of violence in the community. I've really appreciated the transparency portal that you have in place and the link to Lex Luthor. But I was surprised that there are so many aggravated battery cases just seems a continual problem. And it made me think about how some other communities have investigated and invested funding for social service supports, mental health workers to work in conjunction with the police, like the Cahoots program in Eugene, Oregon. And I know later we're going to hear about how certain ways we can spend the funding from the COVID relief bill, and that for certain essential services, this might be an identifiable essential service, especially given that we seem to have a gap for our youth in this kind of programming. So I just wanted to make that comment and foreshadow a connection that we might be able to make. And I was really glad that you brought up the McLean County Triage Center, because I think that's a model for doing more. And I certainly am looking to invest more in those kinds of solutions. I did want to ask you about a separate question, because it's something I've started to do a lot of research around, and I'm starting to have conversations with people. In some communities, they're banning what they call pretext stops. And you're nodding, like, of course, you know that that's minor traffic violations. I've received a couple of traffic tickets in the mail myself, I admit, when I lived in Chicago. So is that something that your department has considered? Is it something, I mean, I'm asking you out of the blue, so you might need to go back and do some of your own research, but is it something that you think might be another move that we could make in this community going forward?
What in what regard do you mean that, Councilmember McDee? In what would be the purpose of stopping the pretextual stops? Sorry.
Of course. So the big context is in just the gap between folks who are of color who are stopped, and the data that, you know, is still persists, not just here, but nationally. And that in these cases that can escalate into something that is potentially problematic to deadly, that this might prevent those kinds of things from happening if the violation is truly just a minor traffic violation. And early data suggests that there is a lowering of harmful incidents when these kinds of policies are enacted.
I would love to give you a simple answer, but I don't think it's not a simple answer. It's like any other investigative tool. There's upsides and there's downsides. It is not something that we've ever taught at the Bloomington Police Department just to be used happenstance, you know, for no reason at all. Most often when we are using them, they're an investigation into another neighborhood complaint or serious concern that we have that we're trying to investigate. So it would certainly merits more discussion and more investigation. However, you know, my initial response is it's a great investigative tool that, when used properly, can stem crime and enhance public safety. When used improperly and just kind of as something to do to fill the time or whatever the case may be, it has the potential for abuse. But in my experience, the pretextual stops have been in conjunction with another investigation or something else that we're trying to accomplish, not just stopping a car for the purpose of stopping a car.
I see. That's helpful. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Okay, I believe Councilmember Carrillo has a question, but before we do that, though, I'd like to ask for a motion to extend the time, because I think we are past the time.
I'll make that motion.
Okay.
10
Okay,
minutes?
motion by
10 minutes?
Yep, 10 minutes. Sounds good. Councilmember Boland, motion for 10 minutes, and second by Councilmember Maffey. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Maffey,
Yes.
Councilmember Boland,
Yes.
Councilmember Montney,
Yes.
Councilmember Ime,
Yes.
Councilmember Becker,
Yes.
Councilmember Carrillo,
Yes.
Councilmember Ward,
Aye.
Councilmember Crable,
Yes.
Councilmember Krebler.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Carrillo, you may go ahead.
Thank you. So I guess my first question is around, well, I guess it's an ask I think given all the conversation around race and policing and the intersections of both, I am wondering if for future reports, we could actually dig deeper into the breakdown in terms of race around these arrests and these shootings and the data that we are seeing, because I do think it helps to paint a clearer picture. I know that the state does collect data in terms of traffic stops, and consistently there have been, pretty stark racial disparities in terms of how people experience traffic stops. So I guess my question is, and I've asked this of other chiefs before, but to what do you think that's owed, Chief Scott?
You broke up there a little bit, Alderman Creo. I think you were asking me what do I think the greater disparity in racial makeup on traffic stops is?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And the only one that I can come back to is I think the same one that you're referring to, that Chief Hefner provided probably 3-4 years ago. And that is what we direct most of our patrols into our hot spots where they're experiencing the most crime. And that's where that's also, unfortunately, very often the minority inhabited areas. And that just kind of happens that way, that's where those happen. We don't target anybody. We're not looking for a particular race when we're making a stop. We're looking at the crime in an area or the reported description of a vehicle is related to a crime, and making those stops in those regards, or speeding, or equipment violations if necessary, for safety.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I guess so. One question is understanding that this model of using hotspots to determine where areas are patrolled most frequently. Is there anything that you think can be done to curb some of the effects of using that model? Are there other models that other police departments have used to try to mitigate that? So just curious about if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I would have to do the research on it. I'm not aware of a different one that has been as effective in curtailing crime in a specific space. And with the limited number of resources that we have, it would be nice to have always have 2 officers in every district, but we just don't have that kind of staffing. So we staff where the crime has intelligence has told us that's really where it's at, where our statistics have shown that the greater prevalence of crime is, and that's where we focus those patrols. But that's a great question, and it's something that I'll have to do some research on, see if there's another model out there.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's a good answer. I'm wondering also, as we're talking about resources and how resources are best invested into strategies that prevent crime in the community, I had a couple of folks reach out to ask me, and maybe this is a question for you or for the city manager, about whether our current police contract bars some of the things that these other programs have employed, like having social workers or non-police staff respond to calls for help that come into the department. So I don't know where folks got that impression, but I've had a couple of folks reach out to me and say, I'm pretty sure that that's not allowed based on the contract that we have in place now.
I would be surprised if anybody would make that argument. The argument would be if they're going in the place of a police to a specifically something that's a police call. That's something that we are interested in researching and looking into to try to help, and that's probably another statistic that would be interesting for you to see, is whether or not mental health related calls have actually increased in our community. Anecdotally, it seems like we're going to them frequently. Some initial research that I did right after the first part of the year when this started, these questions came to the front, was really less than 1% of our calls would I feel comfortable sending a social worker or a mental health worker by themselves. That meaning that all of the others had, maybe suicide ideation or some violent tendencies either at present or in the past. So it would be imprudent to send a social worker or a mental health person into that type of a circumstance. But we are not opposed at all to a co-responder model and looking at how best that could fit within our community. I meant to come back to this, Councilmember Emig. This, I think you'll find this interesting as well. We have partnered with the Behavioral Health Organizing Committee to research a new app that will give officers the opportunity to run people they come in contact through some quick questions that will then give them an indication whether those people are candidates for diversion. So we are interested in looking into that further and seeing how it might actually work. And there's nothing in the contract that would prevent a co-responder model in my mind.
I'm gonna jump in here real quick and two quick comments regarding socioeconomic challenges, and those being the hot spots that Chief Scott was talking about. Law enforcement's responsive in nature. When we're called, we respond. We deploy more resources to areas that we know are the challenging areas in the community. But Chief Scott actually commented to some of the goals that we have, and that's becoming more proactive. We feel that those are the opportunities to connect with our youth, give them options or have conversations that may not occur otherwise, and try to plant that seed at a younger age, whether it's through a school resource officer like DARE, people remember that, but actually getting into the neighborhoods and using some of the different groups, individuals or groups that might have more credibility than we have as the police department. Credibility with us will come, but it's finding those partnerships to try to be more proactive in these challenging neighborhoods. Another comment real quick, Chief, you were just talking about collective bargaining agreements, responding to Alderwoman Carrillo's question. What we find in general in a collective bargaining agreement is in any given collective bargaining agreement is if we are replacing union work, that's the challenge that we have. If we're not replacing or we're finding a way to assist, that's typically something that the union's not going to challenge with a grievance. And I think, yep, there you go.
Yeah, that's super helpful. And then, yeah, I guess, so as you know, to recap, it would be really helpful to have some of these statistics broken down by race, if that's information that we collect. Super helpful to know what type of calls are coming in, and it was helpful to hear you put them in those categories and the reason why you would or would not feel good about sending somebody without a police officer out to respond to those calls. So thank you so much. And then I guess the last thing is just a reminder, as we're talking about building relationships with folks in the community, and particularly in those neighborhoods that are more people of color populated, the use of the word citizen as sometimes excluding certain folks who live in our community from the narrative. Just a little reminder, but really appreciate the presentation. Very helpful.
Thank you, Councilmember Carrillo. I did not think of that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we have exceeded those 10 minutes actually, so I'm gonna need another motion, and maybe let's make it the last motion. I do see that we have a couple people who would like to speak, and hopefully I'm not cutting out others. So it looks like Councilmember Matthew wants to make a motion for another 10 minutes.
Motion to 10 minutes extension.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
I couldn't tell who that was.
It was me, Jen.
Oh, okay, Councilmember Carrillo. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Matthew,
Yes.
Councilmember Boland,
Yes.
Councilmember Montney,
Yes.
Councilmember Emig,
Yes.
Councilmember Becker,
Yes.
Councilmember Carrillo,
Yes.
Councilmember Ford,
Aye.
Councilmember Trayvell,
Yes.
Councilmember Crumpler.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The ayes have it, and there are no nays to announce. So Councilmember Crumpler.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chief Scott. Like my other colleagues, I really appreciated your report. I'll be short. I really just basically have a comment, and I've been reading in popular press lately about a lot of the effects of remote learning, particularly on youth, the increase in depression, feeling disconnected from the communities that they live in. And I really just want to echo Councilmember Emig's point about, really, I appreciate the police department's emphasis on trying to build connections with youth. And I, like Councilmember Emig, would certainly be interested in supporting additional resources for that initiative. I think it's a very exciting part of what your officers are doing in this community. And I just wanted to acknowledge that and think that we should do more of that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. And I should also mention that our SROs during the lockdown did spend a significant amount of their time going into homes where students were having difficulties with school personnel and trying to mitigate some of those very issues. So our SROs were very busy during the lockdowns in that regard. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Sorry, my little mouse thing is being elusive here. Councilmember Matthews.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Chief, for the presentation. I appreciate that as well. And I also wanted to voice support for the youth programs. I remember Chief Hefner talking about the importance of them, of, the way he phrased it is, if we don't give kids things to do, they're going to find things to do that we're not going to like, right? Right. And, I can just say that as an adult, I'm very happy that we didn't all carry video cameras in our pockets when I was a child. So, and I think that there's a lot of different avenues that can take. We've talked about, supporting scholarship programs at the pool, or, we've given some help to the Boys and Girls Club to build a new facility on the west side. I know the Western Avenue Community Center does a ton of after-school programs as well. I was very disappointed to hear that City Life is not operational anymore. I had missed that news when that stopped happening as well. So, I appreciate that focus on the youth and keeping kids engaged before things go sideways, right? But I also wanted to talk a little bit about the mental health stuff. I actually have a council initiative that I was working on the wording with. I've talked with the city manager a little bit about, and I did not get it submitted in time for this meeting. So we'll be talking about it next month, to use some of our funds potentially from that we've allocated for mental health with the county, repurposing those, or maybe some of the funds from the tax on cannabis in order to help fund PATH or FUSE or the triage center to have that code dispatch happen, so that we can potentially send out mental health workers to the call, if that's with the BPD or the BFD, whichever is responding to those situations. So that'll be coming forward next month, and I definitely look forward to seeing how we can best partner with our nonprofit agencies to make that happen and get people resources. I think that everybody's goal is to get people either, we don't want people to get arrested who shouldn't be arrested. We don't want people in the emergency room who shouldn't be in the emergency room. We want to get people the help that they need to achieve a better outcome in their life. So that'll be something I'm going to bring forward. We'll probably be talking about next month. But again, thank you for the presentation. We appreciate all you did.
Thank you.
Okay. It looks like we have a couple more people here. I thought we were done. So very quickly, Councilmember Becker and Councilmember Bolin.
Yeah, I will be very quick. I'm not a big Thank you again, Chief Scott. You did a great job presenting the information. I'm not a big fan of looking ever at any one individual piece of data in isolation. So as you do some of the research that our other council members have asked, I would maybe suggest taking this as well. You know, when you think of the hotspots, look at the fact that you're in a hotspot and how much that just decreases the response time when people do need you, and what that does as far as driving success and help and promoting safety for the community. So if there's the other side of, you know, the using the hotspots, I believe there has to be good for that as well as potentially the different angles. So I think that might be a good piece of data if you could present that as well.
We will certainly take a time to research that and see what we can come up with.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Councilmember Boland.
Yeah, I'll be real quick too. Thank you for the presentation and all the information. I really appreciate that you are working and have been working with community organizations, because I think that's very important. And to Alderman Emig's comment about Cahoots, basically that's what that is. Cahoots was a private organization that got in cahoots with the police in order to expand and have those fingers out into the community. So I really support that part of the, you know, your program. So keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Boland. I want to say thank you, Chief Scott, for your presentation. We definitely appreciate the work that you do, and as well as the work that your offices do. And from me, I would say that I'm also appreciative of the fact that you are willing to try different approaches in order to better your service to the community. So that's definitely appreciated. Thank you so very much. So next item on our agenda is a presentation by the Bloomington Fire Department of their 2020 annual report. City Manager Gleason, do you have some introductory comments you'd like to make?
Real quick, thank you, Mayor and Council. This is the 2020 annual report by the Bloomington Police Department, the other half of the public safety presentations tonight. Chief West, you're up.
Thank you, City Manager Gleason. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to present before you guys, and I'll let you know what happened in the year 2020 with the Bloomington Fire Department. As most of you probably realize, COVID played a big role in our year. I'm not going to say that it didn't change things operationally, but it did a little bit. You know, we're in the business of dealing with medical events, and this was a medical event truly. And so we did make some operational changes, but for the most part, things went on as normal. One of the things, you know, our top concern was with the members of the Bloomington Fire Department and making sure they were safe. We knew that if we didn't keep them safe and we started losing personnel, that it was going to cause operational problems with responding to incidents. So again, like I said, our top priority was keeping our members safe. So how did we do this? You know, one of the things we did is we worked with Bloomington Dispatch quite a bit. They were fortunate enough, the Pro QA system that we used for EMD had a piece we could turn on that actually dealt with pandemics. And it allowed our dispatchers to actually answer or ask questions that actually dealt with the pandemic, and provided us more information and allowed us to be more safe as we responded to those incidents, you know, able to get a better idea if we were responding to somebody that might have been a positive COVID patient. So that was a big part in the first part of it. So sorry about that. I should have had him start the slides. If you go to the next one, please. There we go. So yeah, so changes operationally, we just made a few small changes. It was basically a response component. The number of person we were responding to a scene. One point we wanted to make sure we were minimizing the amount of people that were being exposed to possible COVID patients. And then other places, we wanted to prevent that exposure transferring into other parts of the station, vehicles, and so forth. So from there, we also had some challenges within the station. I think this was the bigger challenge, understanding that this was our firefighters and paramedics' second home is the station, and we needed to find a way to make sure we were keeping them safe within the station. And we had to come up with some creative ways to make sure we spread people out. And so, especially here at Station 1 and Station 4, where the bunk room is basically a dormitory room, and there was no dividers in there. So we actually moved beds into other rooms, making sure we were spreading people out. Eventually, as you can see in the pictures there, we did purchase some temporary curtains that we were able to put up between the beds to kind of partition that off. So our other challenge was PPE. When we first, when this first started, we had our normal PPE supply. We didn't have an abundance of PPE equipment, and it became a concern real quick because we were hearing from our vendors that they were going to limit the amount of PPE we could purchase. So we had to kind of become creative with that. And fortunately, we made contact with the schools at that point. And since they had basically shut down for the year, they had several types of PPE, and they actually had disinfectants that they had in the rooms that they realized that, you know, it would be a good idea to get those to us. And so both Unit 5 and District 87 donated several, well, I wouldn't say pallets, but several boxes of PPE and several boxes of disinfectant. So that helped us in that supply chain area. Excuse me. So COVID, again, like I said, was a challenge to us, but we made it through, and I'm very proud of how our members did handle it. You know, initially, like I said, there were some learning curves, but once we had been at it a while, things kind of normalized, and you know, we still are doing things different than we did before COVID, but again, we're back to kind of a normal response at this point. Next slide, please. What kind of accomplishments did we have this year or in 2020? We did take delivery of a new fire apparatus. We took delivery of a 107-foot aerial device that is stationed here at Station 1. This was something we had been looking at. We had a vehicle that was due for replacement, and we needed to find something in the downtown area that would help us with our ISO rating. The ladder trucks that we had down here for the past few years were not quite tall enough to meet the requirements of ISO. So we had a group of firefighters that got together and started speccing out this vehicle, and we were able to fit this 107-foot ladder truck into the station, which should in the future help us with our ISO rating. We also purchased or took delivery of a new ambulance, and it is located at Station 2. Again, this was designed by members of the fire department, and it meets their needs. You know, we would, as staff, we kind of oversee those committees, making sure that they understand how much they have to spend, and they stay within those spending limits. But we want them to design these vehicles because they're the ones that are using them, and you know, us as staff, we don't ride in them anymore, and so it's important that they're functional for them. We also purchased a new utility truck with a snowplow and a salt spreader. One of the things that we did get through last year, we purchased it last year, and actually installation did not start till this year, was the new upgraded station alerting. And so far, we're very pleased with this. And I'm hoping to give a little bit better report on it come next year and how it's helped us out. One of the things that Chief Moore, before he left, got us involved in is a program called GMET, and it's the Ground Emergency Medical Transport. What this program does is it has helped us gain revenue in our ambulance service. I don't understand it all right now. I'm still trying to learn it, but it's a Medicare piece that helps supplement the Medicare payment we receive. And I think we've heard Finance Director Rathman talk a little bit about this in some of his reports in the past few months about how much money this has brought in to us. This was a program, like I said, that Chief Moore started in 2020, and we look forward to continue it and help our ambulance revenues. The other thing that last year that Chief Moore had started and he actually got opened up was the Emergency Operations Center. And Chief Moore had that vision to have us a place for the city to have for directors, council members, the mayors, to all be able to get together should we need it in the case of a disaster. And working with IT and the police department, and through the water department, they found a location which was in the basement of the water department building on Division Street. So we got that opened up and actually got some equipment placed in it. We got some phones in there with the help of IT, and we look forward to continue working with that this year. So next slide, please. Yeah, so here's our 2021 projects, some things we're working on for this coming year. And again, you'll see that top thing is the fire department recruitment. We are struggling like the police department in finding applicants for the fire departments. In fact, we just completed a application process on Sunday, and we had 26 applicants make it through, which I think about when I came on and we had 300 or 400 applicants at that time. But so we're again working with HR on the recruitment piece. And again, we too are trying to become a more diverse department, trying to more match what the city looks like. So we're trying to figure that piece out. Again, the station alerting, I talked a little bit about that. We got it purchased last year. The installation started this year. And so far it's worked out real well. We've been using it for now a little over 2 months. But there's some other pieces of it that we wanted to put into place. Station alerting became a big issue with safety within the department or within the fire departments. The system that we had, at nighttime when it would alert you, you would have a loud noise, you would have the lights pop on and be awful bright. And health studies were showing that that was awful stressful on firefighters. So what this new system we're looking at adding on to it is no more bright lights, more of a red light in the dorm rooms, and then also what they call ramped up tones. So the tones kind of start off soft and then they get louder to kind of, I guess I would say, gently wake you up. So we have a replacement of an ambulance in the budget this next year too, and another replacement of another fire engine. And then replacement of portable radios. We've got some portable radios that have come to the end of their life as they are failing us. We're unable to get them repaired, so we're looking at replacing some portable radios. We got a roof replacement for Station 1, and then, like I said, continue building out the EOC. We again working with the police department and IT. We've got some ideas for down there that will continue to improve that location. Next slide, please. So this next slide is looking at the number of incidents we responded to. It's over the past 5 years. And, there's no drastic increases or decreases. We've stayed pretty even there for several years, 16, 17, 18. And we started seeing that increase in 19 and 20. At the beginning of last year, we were watching our run numbers in January and February of 20. We were watching our run numbers, and I was noticing that we were increasing them by quite a bit. And I thought, well, we're for sure going to break our record of that 11,385 that we had in 2019 easily. But as the pandemic hit, it was interesting to watch those numbers kind of decline in March, April, and May. In fact, in March, our run numbers declined almost 300 runs in that month. And, that all goes along with the pandemic. And then I'm sure there were people did not want to go to the hospital at that time. So the yellow, like I said, the yellow line is the total number of runs. The green line is the number of EMS runs we went on. So we did 8,929 last year. And then 2,654 fire runs is the red line. So those are the red line. So again, EMS has been for a long time, is 77% of our run volume, where fire is 23%. So this year already, I just looked this evening, and we're already about 650 runs ahead of where we were last year at this time. So I look for that total run number to be probably closer to the 12,000 mark by the end of the year. So we continue to increase runs or incidents. Next slide, please. So this is a look at the number of run or incidents per district, and you can see the map there with 1A, 1B being Station 1, 3A, 3B, Station 3, and so forth. And as has been in the past, you look at that 1A and 1B, so we've done almost 43% of our incidents are occurring in the Station 1's territory, or 1A and 1B. So they're a busy station up here at Station 1. With the next one, if you look at Station 3's run territory, that 3A area, they're in there too. And then Station 4's territory is in that 1,200 run mark too. So, but that gives us a little bit of breakdown of each area. So in 2018, Council gave us 6 more firefighters to allow us to operate a 5th ambulance out of Station 1. So we have not been at full staff manning for probably almost 3 or 4 years now. So we've really not had the opportunity to run that ambulance as a 2nd ambulance out of headquarters. However, February of last year, Chief Moore, and staff decided that, hey, let's get this thing up and running and just see what it would do with our response times. So from February to July, we ran that 5th ambulance, and we manned it with overtime personnel when needed, and to see if we could gather any data and see what it did. And we only ran it for a half a shift, so that was only 12 hours per day did we run it. So we ran it, started in February, and by the time we got to July, we decided we just can't continue to do this. We noticed our overtime budget was starting to run high. Plus, we didn't want to take the chance of, there's 2 more personnel that we could get exposed to COVID, which could affect us manning wise. So in July, we decided to stop the 5th ambulance, and we've not run it since. We did gather some data. It didn't give us good data on response times, but it did show us that what we call unit hour utilization, which is how often like Medic 1 would be on a call in their territory. And then they would have another call, and we would need to bring another ambulance from another district in. We did show that we did lower that chance of having to bring another ambulance in from a different district. So we did gather a little bit of data, but again, we're hoping to get to some type of full staffing where we can operate that more often and gather some more data to see what it does do to the response times. Something else to think about in this whole thing with all these runs is we did run outside to other fire departments and provided mutual aid 336 times last year. As most of you probably know, we do run that EMS chase vehicle, and that's what several of those are. Is we go out and we'll meet an ambulance in the rural area and bring it up to an ALS level ambulance when they need that. So, but we did do 336 mutual aid responses. Next slide, please. So this breaks down our fire responses to the call types. As I said, we had 2,654 incidents last year that were fire responses. Again, you can see, as has been in the past, false alarms and false calls are leading the way of those responses. And you'll see service calls there are second. And our service calls will probably have increased due to the fact that we may get a call in a dispatch for a person that has fallen and just needs some assistance to get back up or get put back in a chair. And so we have changed our response to that last couple of years, where we may not send an ambulance, but we might just send a fire apparatus to help get that person up and then put them back to where they need to be, and then we'll clear up. Again, this just helps us keep our ambulances in service more often, so they can respond to their calls a little bit quicker. Fires, you'll see 211. Just please remember, those are all fires, including like grass fires, trash can fires, so forth. We did have 66 fires within inside of a building last year. And so our fire loss for last year was just a little over $2 million. Our Tracy Drive was our largest fire last year, 1920 Tracy Drive, which occurred in December. And we estimated it about a $500,000 loss. Then we had a residential house with a $265,000 loss, and then some smaller ones from that too. So, but total fire loss was $2 million. Next slide, please. EMS responses. Here's a breakdown of the 8,929 EMS responses we had last year. Again, falls is leading. It has in the past too. Sick person was the next one. Breathing problems, and then the psychiatric problems. And you will see pandemic and epidemic outbreak on there. That's a new one. Like I said, we were able to start tracking those, and a good idea of what we responded to. What we felt was a pandemic or type patient was 487 times. So out of those 8,929 incidents, we transported 6,725 patients and so that's how many people we took to the hospital. So not every call we transported somebody. Sometimes we get a refusal where somebody just decides they don't want to go, or it was a medical alarm that went off and the person accidentally pushed it or whatever. So that was down from just a little bit from 2019, where we did 6,924. And again, I think that's being down in 2020 was just due to the fact I think we had those months in March, April, and May where people just didn't want to go to the hospital at that time. Next slide, please. So now we're going to get into the response times. I know this graph can sometimes be hard to understand, but the thing we've set a benchmark for the department, and what we're looking at here is for fires. And to understand, response time is the time that dispatch alerts us, so we receive the tones to the station, to the time we arrive on scene. Our first unit arrives on scene. So this graph is on the fire side of it. We've set a benchmark of 5 minutes and 20 seconds is the time we want to be from the time we've received that call to the time we get on scene. And you can see we want that to be 90% of the time. So it's not 100%. We've come out, the standard is 90% of the time we want it to be at that 5 minutes and 20 seconds. So as you look at the graph, you're going to see some blue bar lines, and you're going to see the orange bar lines. And the blue is basically just saying, hey, you know what, this is the 50% mark. And so 57.5% of the time, or 50% of the time, we are well below that 5 minutes and 20 seconds, which is good. We are at 5 minutes and 20 seconds 75.8% of the time we run on calls. So again, it's not bad, but we want to be better than that. And so the 90th percentile, you can tell we are at, I believe, 6 minutes and 18 seconds is usually where we're at the 90% time. So again, we got some work to do on that one. We are doing better. If you look at the years before, we have come down in the amount of time. So again, I think, you know, we're not real sure exactly why we're so high still. Some of it has to do with that Northeast area. And then some of it has to do with Station 1's, how many calls they're getting in their territory. So we continue to look at ways we can improve those times. And I think the station alerting is going to help us. We've had conversations with departments that put the new station alerting in, and they've seen sometimes between 15 and 45 seconds improvement in their response times. So next slide, please. So this is the same graph, only this time we're dealing with EMS. And the benchmark time has been lowered just a little bit by about 20 seconds. And that's due to the fact that, you know, when you're going on an EMS call, you're not having to get out to the truck and you're not having to get dressed. So we give that extra little bit of time on the fire side for those individuals that they're having to put their bunker gear on. Times don't look as great here as far as improvement wise. And I'm not sure why that we've not seen better times on the EMS side. We probably should. But again, if you look at that 5-minute mark, and you know, 50% of the time we're at that 4 minutes and 18 seconds. And we're meeting this 5-minute mark at 66.3% of the time. But our 6 minute and 54 seconds for the 90% is just a little bit higher than I'd like to see it. So I'm hoping we can find some other ways to help reduce that time and get us closer to that 90% mark. Next slide, please. So what else happened last year? You know, personnel wise, I talked about how we are down people. However, we did hire 8 individuals last year. We hired 5 in January, and then I believe 3 in July. Unfortunately, we had 2 of those individuals leave us already. They went and they took other jobs, I think closer to their homes. And we've kind of seen that here in the past few years. And I mean, I hate to say that we've kind of started to live with it, but we have. We can't be mad at somebody if they want to go back to their hometown, I guess. We'd find a way to keep them here, but it just doesn't seem to work out all the time like that. So yeah, we hired 8 new members. We did see 6 members of the department retire from September through the first part of December, including Chief Moore. And something to note there on those 6 members, they were all officers and combined had a total of 170 years of experience with the department. So we lost a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience right there. And then we did make some promotions. We did promote 1 member to an assistant chief, 1 member to battalion chief, and then 5 members to the captain position. Next slide, please. So as we said, with the COVID year, it was kind of crazy, you know, and then how did we continue to train through this COVID pandemic? We did it. We found ways to do it. Like most everything, you know, a lot of things went virtual. EMS is one of those things where we have to do it. We had to make sure our guys continue to get their training. And so we worked with our EMS office. They had developed a program on the fly kind of to get it virtual. And we were continuing to do our EMS training on a monthly basis. You know, again, to protect our personnel, we stopped all multi-company trainings. And so basically, if you were going to do training, it was going to be within the station that you were stationed at and with your personnel only. But our guys did find some creative ways. You can see one of the pictures right there. That's out at Station 3. Members put together a course there with the hose and just using plywood and pallets to do their training. And so some people became real creative on what they did to make sure that they were getting the training they needed, since we weren't able to get out and do like we usually did. We were fortunate enough when some of the schools did close, like Wesleyan, we were able to get into some of their buildings and conduct trainings in their buildings. You can see that kind of in the top upper picture there where they're working down the hallway. Some of our mandatory training, almost all of our sending people to classes or training came to a halt. So we had to find a way for ARF training, or our airport firefighters. They are required on a yearly basis to have a live burn. And so a lot of times we were sending people to Chicago or Louisville or something to get that live burn in. So we had to kind of figure out what we would do. And Training Officer Reed was able to get in contact with somebody that has mobile props, and we brought mobile props in here to the airport and we did our training here. So with everything that happened last year, I was kind of surprised when I asked our training officer how many total hours of training we had compared to 2019. And I was really surprised that we were only about 200 hours shorter total training hours in 2020 than we were in 2019. So we had 20,118 hours of training in 2020. So I was very impressed with that, especially for everything that was going on. Next slide, please.
Hey, Chief.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump in here real quick. You're well over the 20 minutes. I'm going to hand it over to I'm going to hand it over to the mayor to see if he can get an extension on your presentation as you wrap this up. Mayor?
Okay.
Is there a motion to extend it by another 5?
I'll make a motion to extend.
Okay, motion by Councilmember Bolin.
I'll
Second. Is there a second? Okay, second by Councilmember Craybill. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Matthews,
Yes.
Councilmember Bolin,
Yeah.
Councilmember Motney,
Yes.
Councilmember Emig,
Yes.
Councilmember Becker,
Yes.
Councilmember Carrillo,
Yes.
Councilmember Ward,
Aye.
Councilmember Crable,
Yes.
Councilmember Crumpler.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The ayes have it. There are no nays to announce, surprisingly. So go ahead, Chief West.
Sorry about that. Thank you for extending my time. I'll finish up here shortly. So public education was the next thing. I mean, it became a challenge for our public education officer, Eric Davis. And, he was used to being face-to-face with individuals and out in the public. And we just had to kind of end that. So how did we overcome that? Well, social media, I know there's a lot of bad things with social media, but I think in this case, it really did help us out, allowing us to get messages out, such as the importance of Scott's Law, smoke alarms, and one of the programs that's out there now is called Close Your Door Before You Doze. And just so he was able to push stuff out through social media, which helped out quite a bit. He worked with the schools in the fall because a lot of times that's where he would have been at. And he, again, virtually, he was able to do some stuff Zoom or whatever virtual media they used. But one of the neat things he did is he did an interactive tour of Station 1. And so the younger kids were able to do this tour and actually click on it, and different things would occur. So that was unique. Eric did work with the HR department. We did create 8 videos to assist with the recruitment. So I think those are out there now, and I'm hoping that they're helping us out. And probably, we all saw and heard is the birthday parades. Again, even our guys were used to having people come into the stations and getting tours and stuff. And this was a way for us to still kind of intermingle with them out in, even though we weren't getting face to face with them, we were able to see them as we were doing these parades.
Next slide, please. Real quick, a couple things. Our hazardous materials team had a very uneventful year last year. We did have 8 incidents that we responded to. Most of these were small spills, fuel releases, and that kind of thing. The one thing we did do right before COVID, we were able to do some joint training with the Normal Fire Department's technical rescue team. This was put on MABUS, and they actually provided funding for this. In fact, we were able to recoup our overtime that we occurred when we did this training. This training took place just out west of town here at a facility. So next slide, please. And then the last thing is by state statute, we're required to investigate all fires. And so we do have 6 trained fire and arson investigators. And last year, they investigated 35 fires. And they broke down into causes of them. 14 were accidental, 8 were left undetermined at this point. Currently, 5 are still under investigation. And then the one that was a little surprising to me was we had actually 8 intentional set fires last year, whether it was in a vehicle or in a building. So these investigators on these fires will work with the CID from the Bloomington Police Department and try to solve these cases or get an arrest made on these. So. Next slide, please. I think that's it. Again, thank you guys for allowing me to kind of give you an overview of what happened at the Bloomington Fire Department last year and be open to some questions.
Okay, it looks like we have Councilmember Ward. Thank you so much for your presentation, Chief West. Councilmember Ward?
Yes,
and
thank you.
Councilmember Bolden. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Chief West. That was really helpful and illuminating. For probably obvious reasons, I'm really curious to hear a little bit more about the calls to in District 1A and 1B. And I wonder, are you able to, and maybe you don't have these data at the top of your head, but are you able to give me a sense of were most of those calls to 1A and 1B for fire or EMS?
So no, most of them are fire or EMS calls.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you have a sense of how that compares in 1A and 1B, how those numbers as an aggregate compare to the year before? Is that about the same, up, down?
They're about the same. We know that area is our busiest areas. Yeah.
What do you make of that? Why it's so busy?
I don't know for sure. I mean, part of it might be the socioeconomic piece of it, I think. And then, there are more fires over on the west side in those areas than in other areas. We've seen that. But, otherwise, I'm not real sure why.
And then one last question related to that. Do you have a sense or is it possible to get a sense of how many of those EMS calls in particular might be to repeat calls to the same addresses?
I don't have that right off the top of my head, but we can see that or find that information out. I know that is something that in the past, we have had those locations where we do get multiple calls to a single individual. And unfortunately, we had what we call what did they call her? We had somebody that was working with us a while back that when we started having those, we could contact that individual and then they would go out and see what they could do to help prevent having to go there all the time or what needs they needed. Medically wise, and that was being funded by the hospitals at one time, but then I think it got taken away a couple of years ago. And so we're trying to find that person, just kind of like the police, where we can find a way to help those individuals out.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that because I think there'd really be some real opportunities for some public-private partnerships, around, I don't know if it's community health workers that the word you were looking for, but I mean, I could see some real possibilities there.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. And something in the future that, it's it's becoming more popular as community paramedicine. And there are several departments now that have that staffed where, they are able to go out and somebody from the fire department, and check up on those individuals that we respond to on a regular basis.
Yeah, I'd love to talk more about that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Boland.
Yeah, thanks for the report. I appreciate it. I have just two short questions. You showed a map with the 1A, 1B, 6A. Southwest Bloomington didn't have a number. Ward 2?
Shit, it's 4A and 4B. 4A and 4B, yep.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
It was all white, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I know you come out there, but and then also you have an intergovernmental agreement with Normal, is that correct? Where you share, you take calls if they're not available, or you both show up at a big fire, or
Yeah, so that's what it's called a couple different things. Mutual aid or automatic aid and so the mutual aid is more of what we're doing right now, is where when they run out of units, we will respond over there and assist them. If we run out of units, they'll do the same thing for us.
Okay.
The auto aid is more on the fire, I guess you should say, is more on the fire side, where automatically they would get dispatched with us to a specific call. And really the only time that happens now is if we do have a fire in a building that we know a working fire, on our next alarm, they will automatically get dispatched with us to help provide one unit.
Okay.
Yeah, to help provide power.
And I'm aware that Normal has taken on the responsibility of Hudson and Towanda, I believe. Does that have an effect on Bloomington resources at all?
So they've taken on the ambulance services. They've contracted with Hudson just for ambulance at this point. So, it can affect us if they're out in those locations and so they've got 3 ambulances total on duty at one time. So if one of them does go out, that drops them down to 2. There have been multiple times that I'm sure we've gone up to assist them if their other 2 ambulances were out on calls also. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't see any other hands, so just want to say thank you, Chief West, for your presentation and wonderful work that you do with your staff, and look forward to another exciting year. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Next item on our agenda is item 6C, review of the American Rescue Plan COVID relief package as requested by the Finance Department. At this point, I am going to turn it over to City Manager Gleason for introductory remarks.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is something that we discussed last week, that we were going to provide this presentation. Of the funds that the City of Bloomington is going to be receiving, we were waiting on guidelines, still waiting for clearer guidelines, but we do have definitely enough to discuss with council and the community this evening. So the primary purpose is going to be turning the floor over to the Finance Director, Scott Rathbun, to share what those guidelines are, and then open this up to process for you, Mayor, and Council to discuss possibly what next steps are as this takes shape. One thing that I will also share is, sharing that not everything's etched in stone yet, whether it's the guidelines. We also saw in this last week that the allotment that we thought that we had for the City of Bloomington at 13.9 million, or something very close to that, actually dropped down to 13.4 million. And that is based on our lower unemployment rates in our community. So it's good for that reason. But we did lose a little bit more than, or a little bit less than $500,000 of the funding that we expect to receive. Scott, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager Gleason. Yes, this literally is a kickoff discussion The guidance did not come out until last Monday. We had a general outline, as most everyone I think had a chance to see, basically 4 bullet points for the use of these funds. The 151-page guidance even has the title of interim final rule, and there's questions embedded within that guidance posed to the municipality. So, this will be in motion, but this is an opportunity to start thinking what this could mean to the city, running through some of the general outlines of the eligibility of the funds, kind of getting the creative juices flowing, if you will, breaking it down into a timeline, potentially between, more immediate relief to the community versus a long-term. I'm seeing the term transformative used. I mean, this is a tremendous material positive event for the city. So thinking big, knowing there's an immediate need, but also wanting to take the time to kind of get everyone on the same page, see the stakeholders that need to be involved, and do it right from the get-go. Next slide, please. What is it? I mean, the American Rescue Plan, a $1.9 trillion COVID relief package. Our auditors, Baker Tilly, and most other advisors are sort of breaking this relief package into 2 components. The direct relief to state and local governments, known as the fiscal recovery funds, that column on the left, which is the direct funds, and then the other provisions, which they refer to as competitive, and these are more grants, the funds that need to be applied for. And so tonight we're going to be focusing primarily, or almost completely, on the fiscal recovery funds and what that means for the city of Bloomington. Next slide, please. So wanted to put into the presentation, I'm not necessarily going to read all this, but some of the general outlines, the intent behind the relief, and some of the eligibility. So it'll be a little redundant, but here, the funding objectives of the fiscal relief funds, obviously support for COVID responses. So the costs related to mitigating the spread of COVID is part of this. Replace lost public sector revenue. There's a lot of question marks around this category. All municipalities have lost revenue, but what can we use if we claim our eligibility based on those revenues? What can we use those dollars for? There's 10, 15 pages in the guidance related to this. And there's just terms in there that just leave it kind of open. So it's a big question mark at this point, but we will be digging into it. Economic stabilization for households and businesses. Obviously, if we're breaking this plan down into short-term and longer term, that's probably one that will need more immediate attention. And then address systemic public health, unequal impact of the pandemic, things of that nature. Next slide, please. So what does it specifically mean for the city of Bloomington? As the city manager referenced, our allocation is $13.4 million roughly. It was when the initial guidance, or not guidance came out, the initial plan was written into the law on March 11th. Our allocation was around 13.95 million. These numbers are based, from my understanding, on population and unemployment rates. So I'm not sure what kind of recipes are going into the sausage there, but it did drop down to 13.4 million. Still a very material positive event impact to the community. So still very pleased with this. The first installment is due in May. It was actually supposed to be received within 60 days of the enactment of the bill, the law, which would have made it payable last Monday or Tuesday, but the guidance didn't come out until last Monday. All along, we were aware or were notified that there was going to be a certification component to this, where basically the municipality would be certifying they would utilize the funds related to the eligibility requirements. That was not issued until last Monday. I checked with some of my peers to make sure I had not missed that in previous weeks. So once that guidance came out, we submitted Monday afternoon. We've got a confirmation back from the Treasury stating that it's going to take up to 4 days to review. The 4 days kind of came and went. So, my assumption is that they were probably overwhelmed with submissions that first week. So I'm not really certain as to how soon those funds are going to come in, but they are. I do expect them in May. I'm actually expecting them next week, and then the second installment would be due in 12 months. The last line here is kind of related to, again, if we're splitting this into a timeline, funds must be obligated by December 31st, 2024 and spent by December 31st, 2026. So obligated basically means we have a contract in place or we've been invoiced, the project is underway. So there's a long-term component to these funds, and not to say there isn't an immediate need for the residents and businesses that are being definitely impacted, but we just want to make sure we weigh all those when we're making these forward decisions. Now, fortunately for the city, our local cure funds that we received last year, 3.2 million, our strong economy, we didn't have to cut services. We didn't have to utilize our reserves. So those are other components to take into this decision. And once again, I'm saying, our advisors, the webinars that we've watched, are recommending, think big, related to a transformative decision-making and impact on the community. Again, that is not to say that we don't have immediate needs. Next slide, please. Just real briefly, I wanted to make public, some of the examples of uses of funds. The Treasury has broken these down into categories. I'm not going to read all these. They are a little redundant from the objectives of the plan, supporting the public health response, replacing the revenue. As I mentioned, we're thinking that if we can utilize the eligibility of the funds related to revenue losses, it might give us more flexibility in the use of those. But we're not certain related to that. And there's formulas related to calculating how much revenues were lost using 2019 as the base year and a 4.1% annualized increase thereafter, but it has to be aggregate funds lost, not just individual categories, and it goes across all funds. So the inclusion of the arena and parks and things like these are all questions that we have to have confirmed with our advisors of the Treasury. Addressing negative impacts to citizens and the residents, and then potential premium for essential workers. Next slide, please. And then further examples. I'm going to actually, we mentioned, I'm going to skip down the equity focused services, address educational disparities, leveling the playing field. And then there's the really broad category of water and sewer and broadband infrastructure. At the end of this process, if we can't come up with eligible funds related to some of these other categories, we always have water and sewer infrastructure projects that we can utilize these funds for. So this is it's a long-term use and eligibility requirement related to these funds. We have time to make some decisions, but I think in the back of our minds, we know if we can't allocate our funds according to the guidelines of the Treasury, we can always fall back to this use. Next slide, please. Again, not to be redundant, but I just want to state this is a very, very positive event for the city. Nearly $13.5 million to come in over the next 12 months. Again, the funds must be obligated by 12/31/2024. So we have some time to think. I'm looking at this, or I've laid out here, one way to think about this is short-term relief versus longer-term infrastructure transformative change for the city. Who do we want involved in the decision-making process? Staff, council, community. Do we want to include regional partners? Do we want to combine resources? I'll give Baker Tilly credit for this. They recommended, looking at it from a regional standpoint in the event, we have a large need in the region. Could you combine resources and address that need with these funds? We want to make sure that we assess other American Recovery Rescue Plan program funds versus using fiscal recovery funds to avoid duplicating resources. So we have the rental assistance program the state's putting on. We want to be cautious about not offering something similar so that we're duplicating the use of those funds. On considerations for transparency and communication, we're evaluating here internally posting of this information on the website, being very transparent related to the use of the funds, et cetera. Accounting controls and the investment of the funds. We've already set up a project code within the accounting system to track the revenues. We're tracking all the expenditures in a particular project code. We'll always be able to report on the ins and outs of those dollars. The investment of funds, this is a future topic for council. We're reviewing our investment policy internally and potentially even an advisor to be related to that. Next slide, please. So the Department of Treasury has issued the guidance. They have some pretty good documentation out there. A lot of it is still vague though. But we wanted to include, if anyone wants to do some research on their own, some of the links to these resources. There's also, along with these, I've kind of listed them in order of, least detail to most detail. There's a frequently asked questions document on the Treasury as well. So if you go to that homepage, that's a pretty good document as well. I was looking at today, it's about 16 pages long. So somewhere kind of in the middle there that summarizes it just in different ways than some of the other documents. Internally, we know there's going to take some time for us to study this. We know all of our advisors and other resources like GFOA, they have people that specialize in understanding legislative guidance. And so we're kind of waiting we're waiting for them to, kind of do another wave of webinars and issue another wave of recommended actions and their take on these. And we're studying it ourselves, but that's kind of the phase we're at right now, taking it all in, trying to lay out potential considerations for the council to discuss. And at this point, I will turn it back to City Manager Gleason for discussion.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate the presentation. Definitely more to come on these discussions, but at this time, Mayor, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Okay, well, thank you. Sorry, I hit the wrong button here. The camera was off, but yes, thank you very much for the presentation. And Scott hit on a number of things that I also had a question about. Is what is the process going to look like for all of us, and how do we, who do we need to reach out to understand what the needs are in the community? What is the timeline? Who needs immediate relief? Who doesn't? And who are the other individuals or stakeholders that we need to talk to within the community to try to make sure that we have the most effective program possible. One of the things that I am very careful about, I understand, it's kind of there can be a lot of confusion about what is going on. There's lots of programs going on, and I want to make sure that we don't duplicate efforts and make the best use of these dollars. So with that said, I look forward to us putting together a process that allows us to do this very thing. And I'm going to go ahead and see if we have questions from council members. Okay, so I see two hands right now, so we're going to go ahead and start with Councilmember Boland and then Councilmember Montley.
Thanks, Scott, for all the information. I did read some of the stuff that you shared with us from the links. There is a lot of information, and I think before, well, at least for me, before I can offer any suggestions as to what to do, is that I need to be educated. So I don't know how we can go about doing that, but whether it's, getting people in and doing a video. United Way had done a video conference about this Illinois rescue plan for the landlords and rent relief. And I think that if something like that was offered, to educate us. I don't know who you would bring in to do that. And then a broader discussion about where we might want to spend things. And in the meantime, we would get more specific direction from the federal government. Does that, knowledge is power. I just want to know as much as I can before I make a decision. That's all.
I agree. My quick comment on that is, our intent is to continue studying internally the guidance, but we're kind of waiting, as I mentioned, for that kind of second wave of informational webinars by GFOA, by Baker Tilly, and then we'll condense that into more manageable format for you guys, for council, and for city manager, deputy city manager internally, and provide additional education as it comes in. We think that the guidance, the interim final rule with the questions in it, will probably be reissued. I'm just making a guess, but within 30 days they could refine that. But we do know that there are all these advisors that are scrutinizing this guidance, just like we are, but they're trained in kind of interpreting, the language, and they'll be coming out with, a layman's sort of, framework for us to utilize.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Montney, and then Councilmember Ely.
Hi, Scott. So the lost public sector revenue section, the funding objective 2, that one seems pretty straightforward. Would we be looking at, for example, the gaps that you were seeing in the tax revenue summaries that you've put out over these last few months?
Yeah, I thought that was going to be our most flexible category as well. I've read that section a couple of times. It's going to be, it's aggregate revenue against general revenues. So the definition of general revenues across all funds, we need to just define whether or not we can include the arena, parks revenues, which we don't put in that major tax revenue exhibit that we do every month. Parks revenue, a lot of it has an offset in expense. So if they don't do a program, we don't have the offsetting expense. Pools is a perfect example of that. We don't open a pool, we don't have any expense. So if we can utilize pool revenues, in our revenue picture and our loss for the year, that creates flexibility, within our request. And then there's a section related to, I have it printed off here, what you can utilize lost revenues for. It's not just wide open, but in a way it is, because there's this language in there that's kind of maddening a little bit too, because there's all these but are not limited to comments in the guidance. I'm sorry if I'm getting into too many details, but government services that we can utilize the lost revenues for include but not limited to maintenance or pay-go funding, infrastructure, including roads, modernization, cybersecurity, et cetera. So I'm sorry, kind of that revenue picture is like one of the biggest ones we want to understand the quickest. And we do just have a couple of big question marks in there.
Well, it was looking like to me that just the major tax revenue summaries that you put out were already showing, through February, over $5 million under what your expectations were for those various tax revenue categories. So not even withstanding the other potential public sector revenue losses, that essentially eats up this year's, potential payment, I guess.
Right. You're exactly right. We have the requirements. We have to do the reporting as of calendar year ends, and we have to use this 4.1% appreciation factor. So that information we submit is versus budget. So it may end up being approximately $5 million, but we have to do the calculation based on 2019 and then roll it forward by using 4% increases per year, and then compare our actuals compared to that number to see what our lost revenues are. So, it may end up being what But I guess I'll use this example. If we thought we were going to do really well and we budgeted a high number, we might be way under that budget number. But if it doesn't correlate with the requirements of the Treasury, with this, which 4% is a pretty hefty increase per year. But if 2019, our base year, was low and using 4% per year, we might not be at a full $5 million loss due to COVID. So that's really getting in the weeds, but it's good for, these are good questions. It's good for you guys to understand, or not you guys, you council to understand that there's going to be a lot of crunching of numbers because we have to substantiate these and we have to do them very specifically to the way the Treasury was requiring us to submit. I think it's like a quarterly submission that we have to do. It has to be very standardized so that they're not looking at different financial support, from all these municipalities across the country.
Yeah. Well, I was asking for a couple of reasons. I mean, first of all, it seems like on the one hand, we can look at this and think of it as a windfall. Think big. What are we going to do? How will we spend it? On the other hand, when I'm looking at the revenue loss just from these last, 10 or 9 or 10 months, I guess, from this COVID period, it's almost a wash. So if we're able to operate with that much revenue loss and use this fund in a creative way, or transformative, I think is the word that was used in the content, then that would cause me to ask, how is it that we're operating with $5 million under what our assumptions were for those revenue categories during that period? So just more of a thinking out loud. I'm not expecting a response. I just wanted to share kind of the thought process that I was going through in terms of really internalizing how much money really is this? And if it really is around those tax loss categorical gaps, then it seems to be pretty much in alignment with the losses that have been incurred.
You're coming up at it from the right angle. I will comment quickly that we did get $3.2 million in grant revenue last fall. So that materially offset, a lot of those losses. So that's one of the reasons, that we're not being severely impacted during the 21 fiscal year because of the local cure money that came in last year, the 3.2 million. And then, we did, cut back some expenses and some revenue categories are doing a little bit better, but that's the $3.2 million is a material offset to the losses that you've noted.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I appreciate that. I'll just leave with the comment that obviously, there's a lot of passion around our roads. That's a word that you mentioned in this. And with that particular category of revenue being down and conceivably will be down materially in light of the fact that work from home is going to continue to be a prominent option for many of our employers here in town. So that's one category where that shortfall already exists. And just, putting it out there that should be a consideration as we think about making up that shortfall for the public sector revenue loss specifically. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Mayor, you're on mute.
Sorry, Councilmember Enig.
Thank you, Mayor. Those are great questions, Councilmember Mike, for asking them. I'm wondering too about, getting more details related to these numbers. But Scott, at this point though, we're funding, our infrastructure funding is as we promised and budgeted for, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
we did a couple cuts, like we didn't do the full repair that was originally budgeted for the Market Street garage, things of that nature. But the other infrastructure like roads, et cetera, full on, yes.
Well, I would argue that, or suggest that this be a parallel process, that while we're scrutinizing more the ramifications of all of these guidelines and really thinking about how much in the end we can make choices about expenditures, I wonder if simultaneously we can start to gather some information from people locally that we already partner with, but in terms of those needs that we see becoming increasingly important. I know that some of us have discussed using perhaps a piece of these funds to offset the utilities costs. The other issue that I've been hearing about recently a lot is real concern around childcare as families are trying to get back to work and figure out next steps. And certainly as we move into trying to stabilize our housing insecure, I mean, I'd like us to try to get information about where those gaps are in the community from people who are doing that work. The same thing we really focused on when we were hit with COVID-19, just to make sure that we're making informed decisions as best as we can. So that's the kind of information I too would like us to consider as we move forward.
And real quick to that point, Alderwoman Emig, we are, when we get to the point, let's say we're writing checks or funding different projects, we are going to be providing you as much data as we possibly can so that you're making informed decisions. Because there's going to be segments of the community, individual residents of the community that are going to ask, why not this or why not that? So we want to equip you all with the data to, again, support the decisions that are eventually going to be made. So point taken.
Thank you.
It looks like Councilmember Boland, you have another question? Your hand raised.
Yeah, it's real quick. When Alderman Emig was talking about reaching out, the question that had come to mind was, United Way has kind of done some of this research, and they have a structure in place. And I wonder if we could kind of feed into that, or at least work with them, partner with them to get some discussion going, because they have their ear to the ground, and they are going to be advertising the Illinois program a lot. So if we partnered with them, that might be beneficial. It's a thought.
And it's a good one. There are many resources out there that we will be calling upon, again, to collect that data so that the council can make informed decisions.
Sounds good. And next we have Councilmember Becker who has a question or comment.
Yeah, this is just hopefully building on the other question, and it's a way that getting the information I think other folks are asking for is helpful to me. And that is, if we look at the request, as Sheila mentioned it, and actually as everybody mentioned it, I want to see, here's a category that we believe there's a need, and maybe we'll pick up small business assistance as an example. So what other programs are out there? What other grants are out there? How much money is in each of those? How's it currently allocated? Do we already have money budgeted for that? And what is the total need? If we can see each line like that, then we can make sure we aren't, double dipping. We can make sure we make decisions that are based on where the money truly needs to go more efficiently, rather than, as we all do in a situation of need, we tend to gravitate towards an emotional need or something that is a project that maybe we know more about because someone mentioned it to us. So if we can get the data and just go across all the lines and say there's grants on from these three organizations on this topic, and kind of put it into a nice format where we can make some decisions with really good data to match the need versus the available funds from this and every other program, I think it'll be easier to make good decisions. Hopefully that makes sense to Scott and Tim.
Yes, I think that made sense, Councilmember Becker. Thank you. So City Manager Gleason, I don't see any other hands, so I just kind of wanted to ask, what should the council expect between now and the future? What are kind of the next steps as far as staff is concerned? Are we having another committee of the whole at one point, or?
Definitely. As soon as we get information, we're going to push that to council. I think that there's going to be stuff that's coming at us so quickly that we can't really wait for the committee of the whole every month to make these follow-up presentations. But we're going to wait until we feel that we have something of substance to publicly inform council. Communication to council will be by way of the city manager updates as we collect information along the way.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. So we're going to go ahead and move to the next item on the agenda, which is item 7I, council initiative by Council Member Ward to direct city staff to seek input from representatives of the local disability community and provide city council with an updated recommendation for an ADA accessibility transition plan. Just so you know, those of you who, especially those of you who have not been a part of a council initiative discussion, there's not much of a discussion actually. Councilmember Ward is going to present her initiative for 3 minutes. And we do have 3 choices. She's going to recommend a specific motion, and basically we'll have each one of us will, or each one of you will have to vote and decide whether or not you want to support her motion to move on to the next step, which would be either council discussion, further discussion, or further analysis by the staff, or to not just support the motion. So just wanted to make sure I mentioned that, so there's not a whole lot of time for discussion here, so we can stay on track. So Councilmember Ward, you have the floor.
Thank you. So this one is the first of a couple of initiatives that emerged out of discussions we had at a previous council meeting regarding accessibility. Both of them are pretty self-explanatory in the language of the proposals themselves, although I'd be willing to take any questions that people have. The purpose of this first initiative is to lay out a plan for updating the city's ADA accessibility transition plan, which has been in draft status since 2015. And while city staff have already begun working on and soliciting stakeholder input on this, the fact that it has been in limbo for so long underscores the need for a deadline, not only to hold ourselves accountable, but even more so to reinforce that we as a city are taking seriously our making our community as open as possible for all of our community members. And so I would move that we put this forward, proposal number 1, that we put this forward on a future agenda, a city council agenda.
Okay, so motion by Councilmember Ward. Is there a second? Okay, second by Councilmember Montney, because I can see you. So, Madam Clerk.
We actually vote
Yes.
on this, do we?
What's that?
I don't think we vote on this with motions and stuff, do we? I thought we kind of gave it a thumbs up or thumbs down, but not a real vote.
Yeah, if I could. So
Okay.
it's
Is that right, Leslie?
Yeah, so it's actually kind of the way that the code reads is that
Going
you
around the room?
actually, well, no, that you actually can make a motion and then do one of the 3 items that you've laid it out previously with Mayor Renner. We went around the room and it took a little bit longer. So I think the intent for Mayor Milawamboy was to kind of clean up the process, but I'll leave that to you guys.
All right. So can we go ahead and vote then?
Are we
Or just go around the room?
at all?
Is there room for any discussion? I think I hear him asking.
No.
Not really. We've never really had much discussion. It's just kind of going around the room, and because when we get to council, if we goes forward, then we'll have more discussion at that point. It's just indicating your interest to have it on the council agenda, future council agenda. Oh, no. Okay.
All right.
So let's just go around the room.
Okay. Councilmember Matthews?
I'm fine with the deadline, but I'm concerned about the wording with soliciting outside information and from outside partners.
Okay. Councilmember Boland?
Yes, I'm in favor of the deadline.
Councilmember Motney?
Yes.
Councilmember Emig?
Yes.
Councilmember Becker?
Yes.
Councilmember Carrillo?
Yes.
Councilmember Ward?
Aye.
Councilmember Crable?
Yes.
Councilmember Crumpler?
Yes.
And if I could really quickly, and I probably should have clarified this earlier. So really, we're not voting on a deadline. We're just voting to put it on a future council agenda for you all to discuss that further. So I do want to clarify in case there's something else that if you wanted to change your vote, we're not imposing any new rule right now. You're just putting it on a future agenda.
Good.
Thank you.
Awesome. So we'll have it on the future agenda. Thank you very much. So next item is item 7II, I guess. Discussion regarding a council initiative submitted by Councilmember Ward to direct city staff to research and develop a Rust Fund resolution as directed and as requested by her. And same thing, so either motion to place it on the future council agenda for further discussion.
Mayor?
Or have, yes.
I apologize. I'm going to recuse on this since my building could be involved in this in the future. So I'm just going to recuse from this conversation.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you so much.
In that case, I really need to as well. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, nobody else can recuse themselves.
Right.
Otherwise, we're in trouble. Okay. All right. So, yeah, so let's, why don't you, Councilmember Ward, sorry, you have the floor.
Yeah, just very briefly, again, this is the second of a couple of initiatives that emerged out of the same discussions. This second initiative is aimed at increasing interest in the use of Rust Fund grants for accessibility improvements as approved by the city some time ago. As reported at a recent council member, there's been very little use of the Rust funds for some time, even before the pandemic, and even less use for accessibility. And this initiative would hopefully generate more applications. So again, I'd like to move that this be put on a future council agenda.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much. So do we have a second by Councilmember Boland? Let's go around the room. Madam Clerk?
Yes.
So perfect. I got Matthew being recused. Boland says yes. Motney, Councilmember Motney. Thank you. We have Emig recused. Councilmember Becker.
Yes.
Councilmember Carrillo.
Yes.
Councilmember Ward.
Aye.
Councilmember Crable.
Yes.
Councilmember Crumpler.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, awesome. The item will be on the future council agenda. Thank you very much, Councilmember Ward. So next on the agenda is our city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Phil, I think we have 2 slides. If you would pull up the first one. Thank you very much. Downtown Farmers Market. It's exciting to have it downtown and open to the public again. It's every Saturday, 7:30 a.m. to 12 p.m. Next slide. And first Friday, Cogs and Corsets, June 4th. So we've got a few weeks, but we'll be announcing this, every council meeting. So definitely one that's well attended, and hoping that the weather is good for this evening event. And then additionally, just want to share our appreciation staff for so many of our elected officials in the community, the Chamber of Commerce that showed up for the ribbon cutting for the hub today. And it's exciting. This is something, again, and I know that we've talked about this in the past. It's reported very well in the media today, but this is something that we're providing the residents of the community. This council directive to be more forward-facing and customer-friendly. The hub is represented by many of the different departments, and it was made, to happen by City Clerk Leslie Yoakum. Many of the city departments helped, IT, facilities, and it's exciting. So please check us out at 115 East Washington. And that is the old Parks area. That would be at the northeast end of the street closest to the old State Farm building. So again, thank you to all of you that showed up, and appreciate the chamber providing a ribbon cutting for us today. Thank you, Mayor, Council.
Okay, thank you very much, City Manager Gleason. And it was indeed great to have so many council members being present. I mean, I don't remember having seen so many of us together in one place in the past, particularly for ribbon cutting. So thank you very much for coming. At this point, I do believe that we do not have an executive session, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Okay, Councilmember Bull, and second? Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Councilmember Becker. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Okay, awesome. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
See you next Monday.